Welcome, Jo Boswell.
Thank you, Janusz. Good to be here.
Good to have you here. So we're going to be talking about customer experience today. And before we dive into that, do you want to do a quick intro, let the audience know who you are and what you do and who you do it for?
Absolutely. So I spent a 27-year career actually with British Airways, where I worked in a variety of roles, but probably from a very early stage in that career, had a lot of interest in customer experience and had a fantastic opportunity to learn from some of the best leaders in customer experience, and in particular Sir Colin Marshall, later Lord Marshall, who was very instrumental at really re-energising the whole British Airways ethos around customer centricity. And I led a big initiative towards the latter part of my career that introduced quite a lot of improvement in the end-to-end customer experience, which essentially was all around how the airline could harness data and technology to really deliver that much more joined up customer conversation across all of the digital and physical touch points in the customer experience. And at the end of that big programme, I was sort of thinking, well, what next really for me and my career? And having spent quite a bit of time trying to learn from other organisations whilst I'd been at BA leading that challenge and seeing who I could learn from, I felt that actually there was a gap in the market for people providing coaching and mentoring for leaders, customer experience leaders who are in that kind of situation. And so in 2017, I left British Airways and I'm now running my own business, Sentio B, and I'm coaching and mentoring customer experience leaders, helping them translate their ambition and their strategies really into tangible business results.
I think that's an awesome service. So, the reason we're speaking is, so I do all of my work with agencies, creative agencies, digital agencies, and customer experience rather, is one of those words like strategy, I think, that's often used but often misunderstood.
Yes.
And I think there's a bit of a gap with agencies in how they engage and interact with their customers.
Yes.
What is it? What does customer experience mean?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think you're so right to highlight that misunderstanding, and I see a lot of that about, and I see people talking about customer service and describe, calling it customer experience when in fact what they're talking about are those service interactions. So in essence, customer experience is really the sum of every single interaction that a client would have with your organisation and with your brand. And so the experience really ultimately is how you as a client are made to feel and how you kind of think and respond to that brand as a result of all of those interactions. And one of the challenges obviously is that oftentimes the interactions are managed by different parts of the organisation, sometimes in different channels, and so many organisations I think find it incredibly difficult to find a way to create that joined up customer conversation where everybody kind of knows what's happened previously, or they're able to reflect what the current context is in terms of what that customer has just experienced and what they might be trying to do at this next interaction. And I think it's an interesting concept, because if you think about it, your small local business has understood the importance of customer experience for decades, if not centuries. But increasingly, because there are some big global brands who are succeeding at recreating that kind of local business feel, but on a much greater scale, I think customer expectations are that every brand in every sector, any industry sector, should be able to do the same. So I think the challenge that we have these days is that customer expectations are sort of increased exponentially. There's been this increased blurring across different sectors and channels, and frankly, a lot of organisations, I think, are really struggling to kind of keep up with that level of expectation.
So you mentioned a really interesting word there. You said it's the way the customer feels. So if I'm an agency owner, why should I care, right? Because I can, I deliver a great service. My clients pay me some money,
Yeah.
and there's a value exchange, and we give them something back, and they receive results that satisfy their objectives. Why should I? Why is it important that I care how they feel
really
when they engage with it?
Well, and I think that the reason that it's important is that actually it can be the source of true differentiation, and the kind of differentiation that is a lot harder actually for your competitors to replicate. And you just have to think about it from your own perspective, and think about, you know, those brands that you remain loyal to, and actually that you might be a little more forgiving of even when things go wrong. And it is those brands that are able to kind of make you feel a little bit more special and recognised, that, you know, where they're being proactive at managing the experience and making it an easy one and memorable one for you. So, you know, I think there is real value to be had in that kind of emotional loyalty that can be created out of the way you make a customer feel, that can turn them into a more enduring fan of your brand and of your service, and can also make them an advocate of what you do. So I mean, you know, one example that I always give, because I've banked with them, you know, I think since the mid-90s, is First Direct. And that is absolutely around the way they are able to, you know, constantly improve on their customer experience. But, you know, every time I interact with them, you know, personally, you know, calling the contact centre, you know, they're just great at showing empathy, and it feels like, it doesn't feel like an interaction with a financial brand. It feels much more human. And that's created an emotional loyalty that means that I overlook all sorts of offers from other brands who could probably give me a very similar offering, and save me money, you know, by switching my current account. But I'm just not going to do it because I have that emotional attachment to First Direct.
I think I need to switch banks, because I certainly don't feel that way, about my bank. I will look up First Direct when I get off the call.
Yeah.
You mentioned, you know, I think it's so important, and there's a huge gap with a lot of agencies in that, you know, we're living in a digital age, right? So all of our communication, a lot of the inbound lead and inbound inquiry process is digital. It's done online, and we email, and then we're fixated by the logo of the brand, right? So we see our clients as the logo, you know, and if the client is First Direct, it's, hey, we're working with First Direct, and we forget a lot of the times, I think, that human-to-human interaction, in that who we're actually working with is Sarah, and Sarah's got a dog, and she's homeschooling, and she's a bit stressed, and
exactly.
she's going through all this kind of stuff, and we lose that kind of human-to-human interaction. We forget about the feelings.
And people buy from people.
A little bit. Absolutely. What can we do? How can we change that situation into a positive? What kind of things can we do to make clients feel better? So
I think it's really interesting the fact that you've highlighted all of the digital interactions, you know, because so often that is the first step. But interestingly, I mean, so often, you know, there are some really, really strong signals that come from those digital interactions. So I think actually the very first step is to think about how can you, as an organisation, as a brand that is offering a service, how can you tap into all of those customer signals? So it is all about, you know, absolutely listening to your customer and trying to understand their current context and what it is that they're trying to do, and picking up on all of those kind of little digital signals, as well as potential physical signals. I think the second thing then is thinking about how you can use that insight more intelligently to start to tailor every interaction to make it more relevant, or even to start to kind of predict what might be next, or what's the next sort of most useful thing that you might be able to do for that client. So that is starting to think about what that customer journey looks like, what are all the different steps in that journey, and kind of really putting yourself into the customer's shoes and seeing it from their perspective, and then thinking about how the information that you have about that customer can help you to really tailor the experience at that point in time. I sort of think of it as a very simple framework. It's listen and then orchestrate. And in particular, if you have a number of sort of different entities within the agency that are going to be interacting with that customer, how can you pull that knowledge, so in effect, everybody has got that same kind of collective understanding of and then can act on the insights to to really kind of personalize or make the customer feel special at that particular interaction, and make the experience more memorable as a result.
Yeah, I've got in my head, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, a mental model of a brain, and on one side is rational, one side is emotional, and the customer journey, let's say it's 10 steps, and some of those steps require a rational satisfaction. It's maybe we need a report, or it's the service that we receive back. But the other interactions, we've got opportunities, I think, to tickle and excite the emotions of our clients, and like you say, to nurture the feeling and give them the kind of positive experience from that interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, in projecting yourself into the client's shoes, think about what the emotional need state is at those different stages. Because I think, very often we sort of think about customer journeys as very functional things, and, what's the functional need that's being met. But actually, if you tap into, what's the emotional need state, what's the right point in time actually for that kind of communication. So, I mean, to give an example, I remember at British Airways, when we were starting to sort of think about how to create that ongoing customer dialogue, we looked at actually what's the best point in time to be sending a marketing email to inspire a customer's, next holiday booking. Well, it's actually the day they get back from their existing holiday, because the time that you're probably most susceptible, to wanting to book the next holiday is when you're sort of suffering that kind of emotional trough of, oh, it's my first day back at work, I need to book some more holiday.
Timing is key. I heard a horror story of that going wrong. Well intended. I think it was, I'm not going to mention the brand name, a huge DIY chain.
Yes.
That many of us go to when we start a DIY job and we need a tool or a screw or something. And they'd automated some emails to offer 5% off or 10% off greenhouses or conservatories or something, at the point in which the customer had just purchased a very expensive greenhouse or conservatory. So after they'd made this 10 grand purchase.
Yeah, that's quite painful, isn't it? Yeah. You see, and that just comes back to, that the signals are all there, that signal was there in the data. They could have very easily, suppressed people that have just spent a huge amount of money on a greenhouse from that offer.
Yeah. Where I see this being really powerful for agencies, I think, is the sales cycle in particular, where many agencies take on clients who have been with another agency previously and they've grown frustrated in the service. So their emotional state of mind is one of frustration, and potentially I've been burned 3 or 4 times and I've got to go through this process again. So it's initially frustration but apprehension.
And quite wary, probably.
wary,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then moving into positivity, you're like, hey, I like what you have to say. And then we sign the contract, and then we get kind of buyer's remorse, because it's a big risky purchase. So we now start feeling very risky.
Yeah.
And the interactions that we have with clients throughout that cycle need to be very different,
Yes,
don't they? So kind of accommodate those different states of mind.
And you need to ensure that actually the very next things that are happening post signing are all reinforcing this was the right decision to make, and providing that reassurance to the client.
Yeah. So you mentioned a minute ago about one of the benefits, I think retention, and it can kind of perhaps increase longevity, increase lifetime value, buy us some mistakes. I think you said.
Sorry, the last.
Sorry, it can buy us some mistakes, afford us some mistakes.
Yeah, I think definitely. So the way the way you respond to a mistake obviously is critical in that. But I think that generally, I mean, if you think about your local restaurant where they kind of really put their arms around you every time you go in there, you probably keep going there, not because it's necessarily, the best value or even the best food, but actually they make you feel special. And on the one occasion that, I don't know, the meal is served up and, perhaps it's not quite to your liking or whatever, that doesn't sort of become the overriding thing that you remember, because actually the sum of all of your other interactions, with that local restaurant mean that actually you're going to be more forgiving of when those things go wrong. But clearly, that is very much predicated on how you respond to your client when those things do go wrong. So it is about being able to demonstrate firstly empathy. You have to you really reflect that you understand their perspective and their point of view, and then you have to be able to make it right, and the ability to resolve the issue really is what can make you stand out from the crowd. And I remember back to my days at BA, interestingly, we used to find that where we had a customer issue that had been recovered well, actually the satisfaction scores tended to be higher than where the whole journey had gone sort of swimmingly and nothing had gone wrong. So at spectacular recovery, it's not saying kind of plan to fail and then recover spectacularly, but the way you do respond actually can have a really big difference and can be a key element in that end-to-end experience.
So I have a very first-hand experience of that, and I like the fact that you use the restaurant analogy, because my experience was it with the restaurant, and I forgive. I might have told this story on a previous previous interview, so I forgive those people who've already seen this, heard this. But my wife and I went for a meal in Bristol, a restaurant chain, small hotel chain that we really, really like. Our table was delayed, so it was like the table's not ready for another 20 minutes. Please sit down and have a drink. The drink never came. We got taken through to the table. We said, "Can we have a drink, please?" It took another 20 minutes, so it's 40 minutes now.
Ouch.
It took 15 minutes for the menus to arrive. So the menu arrived. We placed the order. It took another 45 minutes for the first course to arrive, and we had no basket of bread or anything.
Yeah.
So I think we're an hour and a half in before we've received any food, and an hour in before we've received the drink.
Yeah.
So we're all a little bit frustrated. I remember my wife had spinach, and the spinach, they hadn't washed the spinach, so it was really sandy. And then they brought the drink over and they spilt the glass of wine over my wife.
Oh.
It was a disaster,
Yeah.
absolute disaster from start to finish.
Yeah.
And the maitre d' came over with his head in his hands, and he said, "My God, I'm so sorry. We've absolutely messed this up. What a terrible experience. Here's a bottle of champagne. Of course, your meal tonight is on us. Please come back on Saturday or next Saturday with a couple of friends, and we'll." You get another meal on us and a bottle of champagne, and we'll put you in the private room, etc. Yeah. We left that bad experience, the worst meal ever, the worst meal experience ever. We left as advocates, and we promoted them and told everybody about this great experience that we'd had. But on paper, it was, it was shocking. So that recovery.
Exactly. You can turn a negative into a positive, I think, very, very easily through, that proactive resolution. Absolutely agree. Yeah, I've got loads of examples like that as well.
Maybe that's the top tip we should take away.
But equally, actually, you can be the best restaurant in the neighbourhood, but if you're not making your customers feel really special, and they kind of walk out going, well, yeah, it was a lovely meal, but it's quite pricey. I think that doesn't necessarily create that same kind of emotional attachment. So it is about really turning the loyalty into something that's much more emotional rather than transactional. Because otherwise you're just tempted to kind of go, it's good, but it's quite pricey. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember we went travelling around Italy a few years ago. We ended up in Naples. We had a really, really young family, and we'd heard about this pizza restaurant. I think it's called Michael's, maybe. Really famous, really basic restaurant, but just makes awesome pizzas. Same recipe for 100 years. And it was chucking it down with rain. I think we'd been to Pompeii, chucking it down with rain. We arrived at the restaurant, and there was a queue of about 50, 60 people, and they were handing out raffle tickets to people to queue. And we were under our umbrella, and they saw that we had kids. Yeah.
And the Italian kind of waiter kind of sees us, and he kind of parts the crowd like the Red Sea and kind of calls us through, and sits us down, creates a table for us next to the pizza oven, and dries us off, and it was just such a simple restaurant, but what an experience. We felt loved, and I've told that story. I must have sent 50 people there, I think, because the experience was so good. I can't remember if the pizza was any good, but the experience was just so awesome.
Yeah, fantastic.
Who should be doing this? So whose responsibility is it, or who is best placed within a business to lead the charge on customer experience?
That's a great question, and I see a lot of obsession going on in the kind of customer experience industry, if you like, around what's the optimal organisation, and what should the job title be, and actually should it be called customer experience or experience management, and does the employee experience, should that be involved in it as well, and so on, and there's kind of there's a lot of debate around it, but ultimately for me, the only place this is ever really going to come together is with the CEO. So I think the first thing is that it is about establishing that culture and mindset as a leader in the business. That's got to come from the owner, the MD, the CEO. And then, to be honest, I don't think it really matters who then is really leading that charge. The reality is that the only way it can be delivered will be with really great collaboration across the organisation. So I sort of think you have to enter it with that mindset of, the behaviours need to be demonstrated. And if we say we really care about the customer, is everybody role modelling those behaviours? And that, that has to come from the top down. Otherwise, people will quickly sort of see that it's empty words. And then I think it's about, whoever is best placed to lead that charge, to encourage the right kind of collaboration around the customer, to get everybody on the same page around, a single planning framework for what the customer journey is, and what data needs to be used to sort of really understand it, and just create a bit of internal governance around the different initiatives and how they can be tracked. So I'm not at all hung up on what the organisation should be. It's much more around the behaviours and the collaboration and how to drive that kind of customer centric thinking.
Yeah. Okay, so it starts from the top. It's a big cultural change. I'm a huge fan of, and you might say this is a terrible way to do it, so please let me know. There's a workshop exercise called the anti-problem, and a lot of my clients kind of get stuck trying to think of what the optimal experience is really hard to define when we've never set that standard before. We've never really experienced it. But as humans, we're pretty good, particularly as Brits, right, at having a bit of a whinge, a bit of a moan. We can often think of the negative. So to map out the interactions, and I use an agency example, customer finds a website, finds a phone number or fills in a form, gets in touch, has a call with you, puts a proposal together, maybe a pitch, and then they get onboarded. So map out those interactions and then map out everything that can possibly go wrong. You know, what's the worst case scenario at each of those stages? Can't find the phone number, the website's down, there's typos, it takes 3 hours for somebody to get back to me. Somebody picks up the phone and says, hello, rather than, you know, map out all those terrible interactions, and then you kind of flip it and reverse it and say, okay, what's exceptional for each of these interactions? And it just gives us that framework against which we can then think of what good looks like.
Absolutely.
But it involves mapping out the journey.
And that's, I mean, what you're describing is very much about sort of identifying what the pain points might be, you know, and then removing those little points of friction. And, you know, I mean, absolutely. I think of customer experience as the 4 Ps, which is not the marketing ones, you know, it's about personalisation. So is it tailored, you know, because I'm not interested in a one size fits all. Is it predictive? So, you know, are they trying to anticipate my needs? Is it pain-free? So, you know, there's little points of friction being removed. And is it productive? Does it save me time?
I love that. That's super simple. I love that a lot. Okay, we're going to start thinking about wrapping up. I'm going to ask you, what's your top tip? What's the, you know, if there's one thing that this audience could do, perhaps, one thing that can get them started on the customer experience journey, you know, is there a catalyst or something that they can implement just to improve the customer experience for their current customers? What might it be? So, Jo, what's the
top tip?
What's your top tip? Yeah.
I think I would say it's very much about the leadership skills and demonstrating that customer centricity. So I would say to anybody listening, what is that one thing that you can do to role model customer centric thinking? And what would that change be?
Nice and easy. Thanks, Jo. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
You're welcome.
We shall write up and distribute your 4 Ps model. I think that's a really, really powerful kind of framework for the audience to be thinking about. Jo Boswell from Sentio B, thank you very much.